Hello, everybody. I hope you had a nice snack while you were waiting for me. I'm Dr. Deb. I am the head of the Food Coach Academy, which is doing amazing things. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Today, it is all about how to transform recipes. And in order to know how to do that, you need to know what the ingredients are doing in that recipe. What role are they serving? Because you can transform something that's really high in fat, really high in sugar and salt, and make it into something that's healthy and still delicious. So you're going to learn all about that. So I'm going to go into, if you've been following me, I'm going to go into the PowerPoint for a bit. We're going to go through that, and then we're going to transform a recipe together. And then I'm going to get to your amazing questions. All right. So let's go to the PowerPoint. And I am just going to file. Just got to pull this up. I think you can see it in a small way. We need to view. All right. So there we go. Great news. I was able to get another 40% off. So you can save $4,200 and become a food coach now. So that is the spectacular news of the day. And a lot of people are taking advantage of this. I think we got to the sweet spot. So if you are on the fence, we have a lot of students who end up calling me and saying, I already know how to cook, but I don't know how to teach others how to cook. And I'm just missing, like, how do I put a business together? That type of thing. And they are doing super well in the Food Coach Academy. So whether you know how to cook or you don't know how to cook, Food Coach Academy is for you. It did release on February 11th. What I'm talking about today, you can find in this new released culinary medicine from clinic to kitchen called Maximizing Flavor. You'll learn about sugar and salt and how to use them healthfully, herbs and spices. So you can get that on Amazon. So let's get into it. I'm calling this Beyond Recipes. Now, I want to give you some fun facts. When I was working on the textbook, it was really funny to learn that portion sizes in a cookbook has increased over the past 100 years. So it's not just what we're getting out in the stores, it's also about what recipes are saying is a serving size. So beware of that. And then Waitrose in the UK did this survey of a lot of diners. And what they found was that in the end of 2024, there has been an increase towards plant-based and protein-enriched diets. People are wanting more protein in their diets. They want more plant-based. And I know one of you had asked about following a whole foods plant-based diet and it being bland. It does not have to be bland. And there's growing interest in fermented food because that's all about the gut microbiome, which I believe you're going to be hearing a lot more about this year. If your gut's healthy, you're healthy. If your gut's not healthy, you are not doing your best. So those that are 18 to 34-year-olds, they're less interested in those prescriptive recipes and following it. They like to go on TikTok and things like that and try and find hacks. So how do you take this long step and make it happen in 2 minutes? They're also interested in how-to books like Samin Nosrat's book on salt, fat, acid, heat. We see only 56% of 18 to 34-year-olds are actually using cookbooks, looking up recipes that way. And whereas those that are 45 and older, like myself, are more apt to use cookbooks. And I'm going to go into what I do with a cookbook, what I do with a recipe, because it doesn't have to be that strict. So we're going to go into some recipe pros and cons. Then I'm going to go into what I've created through my 15 years of research, this modular approach to learning and behavior change. And we're going to learn how to build a recipe technique. Then we're going to look at recipe swaps, and then we're going to work on a pasta recipe, making it much healthier than the pepperoni and ham that they add into the recipe. All right. So the benefits of recipes is you can use them as a guide. I got this really great recipe book over Christmas, and it is so cheesy, not in the crazy way, but it has so much cheese in the recipes. Cheese, all this cream and cheese and all of that. But what this author does is she puts together these flavors by combining all these herbs and spices in a way that I never would have imagined. So I still bought the book and I've been working on doing swaps in many of the recipes. I've made incredible meatballs, tomato sauce, fish dish. Say that three times fast. So I get inspired, but I don't follow them as they are. Oh, I know a lot of people don't feel comfortable cooking or don't think they have the skill to cook. So when you are looking at recipes, like a baking recipe, unless you know what you're doing, don't make swaps out because you have to really know how to calculate that amount that you're taking out, whether it's the amount of eggs or grains or butter. That is more like math. Whereas your other recipes that aren't about desserts and baking, you have a lot more freedom to choose among the various items that are in that recipe. So you can look at recipes as training wheels, trying them out, they'll teach you. So if like you're following a recipe for stir fry, you're going to learn how to build a stir fry, how to create a stir fry. And once you have that down, then you can change it up. You can change the protein in there, you can change the vegetables, you can change the flavor components once you know how to make a stir fry. You can taste as you go and make adjustments in recipes. And as I said, learning basic flavor pairings like I do, I get inspired with other authors of cookbooks. That is how I look at recipes. Now, the downside of using recipes is, especially when you're working with underserved communities or your budget's tight, which a lot of ours is. So I'm asking you to go out and buy something, A, you might not be able to afford, you might not like, and you're probably going to end up throwing out, right? So that's one of the downsides. It doesn't honor an individual's wallet or their palate, what they like, or their cultural heritage. So some of them are very complex and there's some skill barriers there. They can be very time uh, very long. It take a very, very long time, full of time and resource constraints, and an over reliance and reduced intuition. So you're learning how to build that one thing. You're not learning how to create meals on your own with what you have in your fridge. So when you just follow recipes, you are constricted in terms of you need these ingredients in order to make this, but you really don't. Once you're able to use your own intuition and look in your own refrigerator, you can find out what is going to work for you that night. So now I'm going to go into this build a recipe technique. And this is where you teach the basic method, like I said, build a stir fry, how to make a stew or a soup or a sandwich or a frittata, and the list goes on and on and on. You teach how to make that basic dish, and then you divide the ingredients into categories. So you get to pick your own protein. If they ask for animal protein, but you're plant based, you might want to switch it up with legumes. They might want you to use rice, but you know what? You really like buckwheat. Fats and oils, the same with butter. Most of the time, not in baking, but most of the time you can switch out oil for butter. And then if you don't like the fruits or the vegetables in the recipe, we're going to learn how to swap those out, the herbs and the spices and the toppings. So this is a way that you can personalize your dish. So here's an example of a one pot friendly meal. And you'll see that there are all these categories. So you get to choose what protein you want to use to build this one pot friendly meal. You get to choose the stock, what grain you want to add to it, the source of acid, the aromatics, and the vegetables. So I have the important categories surrounding that bowl. So you see that there's 7 of them. Well, actually 6. You can choose a plant or animal protein, or you can choose just one, or you can leave them all out. So you get to choose, you get to build, and you get to enjoy with the flavors that you like. So this method honors diversity. It recognizes that each person tastes differently. When I'm talking to organizations about the Food Coach Academy, the number one question I get is, how can you cook for different cultures? And I mentioned this: build a technique. You're building your recipe based on what you have, what you can afford, and what you like. And that is a really great solution to cooking for a culturally diverse audience. It saves you money and it empowers you and your family to be more self reliant. Knowing that you can cook for yourself is huge. It is knowing that you have control over your families and your health. So let's look at what you can swap for what. So, what you want to know is, before you look at swapping, what are the important qualities that this food plays in the recipe? Is it acting as a thickener, a sweetener, a flavor enhancer, a filler? Are you looking for just something that's the same size? Does it add creaminess? So, if indeed it is a thickener and you want to change it out, you need to choose something that's also a thickener. And what is the flavor aspect? You might be trying to replace, maybe you don't, it's too bitter and you want to make it more savory, for example. Are you looking to swap out something and you need to make sure that it's the same texture and density? So, for instance, if you are roasting vegetables and you don't like the butternut squash that they're roasting, and you want to try something different than that, then you can choose carrots, you can choose something else that has that texture and that density to it. But you wouldn't choose something like collard greens, right? Because that's not going to work. Or are you looking to change out the spiciness and the heat? Or perhaps you're just looking for the purpose of it. You want to substitute proteins for proteins, fats for fats, grains for grains, for those that are healthier than the ones that are in the recipe. And you'll see when we go over this recipe that you can look at something that is full of saturated fat and make it full of really healthful fats, polyunsaturated. And you can replace one item in a subgroup with another. So, for instance, making a fruit salad, if you're changing one citrus for another. So, those are the questions you want to ask yourself before you make the swap. So, with fruit, we're looking at the texture, the taste, the type, and the size. So, when you're grilling, you can substitute one fruit for another, but they have to be hardy enough to grill, right? So you're not going to choose something like a raspberry or something else that's very delicate to throw on the grill because it's not going to work. But you could exchange it out for pineapples, peaches, bananas, other fruit that grill well. If a recipe calls for you to poach an apple, but you really don't like apples, then you're looking for something that's solid enough to poach and it won't break up in the poaching liquid. So if you don't like the apple, you could choose a pear or a peach. With a fruit salad, you could substitute a taste for another taste or a texture or a size or a type. So you want to change out your blueberries, but you want something round and small. Maybe you can throw in some grapes cut in half. Or you want to add something that's a little bit less sweet than a peach, and maybe put something in that has a little bitterness to it, maybe like a blueberry. Or you just want to go for this using the same texture. With smoothies, that's a better word for it. With smoothies, you can substitute based on the taste and the flavor that you want to add to the smoothie. Now, smoothies are super easy to switch to switch because it doesn't really matter the texture because it's going to be pulverized in the blender, and you're really looking at what flavor it is that you want and what nutrients you want in that smoothie. For vegetables, we're also looking at the texture, the taste, the type, and the size. So for grilling, same goes for here. You want to make sure that the vegetable is hearty enough to grill. So your peppers, your corn, your zucchini. So if a recipe is a grilled shrimp and vegetable pasta dish, you can change out the vegetables if you don't like the ones that are listed. With roasting, uh, for example, you don't want to do a roasted lamb, but you really like the sauce that they're doing with it. Roast a cauliflower. I had a cauliflower. Oh, I went to a spa, people, and let me tell you, I had a had a cauliflower, and I thought I went to heaven. It was incredible. So those of you that are thinking you can't swap cauliflower for lamb, you absolutely can. And then when we're looking at steaming, we want to make sure that the texture and the size and the type, because you don't want to steam vegetables that take different times to steam in the same steamer. So, for instance, if you are steaming carrots and then you want to steam peas at the same time, the peas will be done before the carrots, that type of thing. With leafy greens, you can substitute one leafy green for another, but sometimes it'll be based on the hardiness of the green. So, for example, kale, roasted kale gets crispy with just a little olive oil, salt, and pepper. You can add that to the top of pasta dishes and you will thank me for that, or you can just have that as a snack. Now, again, collard greens, they are not going to get up crispy like that. They just aren't hardy enough to be able to do that. So you just want to make sure that they're going to serve the same purpose in your recipe. With grains, we're talking about the quality. You might here you're going to look at I want something that's more whole grain, perhaps, than processed grain. We've all heard of the ultra processed foods not being healthy for us at all. So when you're swapping grains, you're thinking either I want to change this processed recipe to a whole grain recipe, or I want to decrease the amount of protein in my dish, especially if it's expensive, right? So maybe I'm going to add, and you've learned this from me before, I'm going to add some grains to my stir fried turkey meat and make it go twice as far. So let's look at roasting. So you can, oh, that's from vegetables. So that is an error. Please forgive me for that. Let's look at pasta now. So you want to substitute some of the meat and the poultry with some other options like your whole grain rotini, and that's what we're going to look at today is adding on some whole grains into a recipe. For pennies, it creates a lot more serving sizes and you get a whole bunch of fiber for that. Um, Salads, substituting with other leafy greens based on flavor and taste. So radicchio for arugula. And obviously here am still focused on mostly vegetables. But for salads, let's take salads and grains. If it asks for quinoa, and I don't like quinoa, I might want to do couscous. Or if the morning breakfast calls for oatmeal, but I'm allergic, that's when I do roasted buckwheat kernels. So you can see that you can make these swaps with the grains. All right, and here we go again. This is the real grain slide. All right, we already went over some of this. Again, forgive me. So when you're looking at pasta and crackers and bread, switching out whole grain for the processed grain is what you're looking for. When we're talking about thickeners, you can use a whole grain flour for white flour when you're making a roux or a typical white sauce. And we talked about cooked grains, how you can substitute one for another. And when we're looking at grains and baking, that's when it gets a bit tricky. I'm going to show you a book later when I go on camera that you can see how to do that because Gluten-containing grains provide the texture, and sometimes when you choose other grains that don't contain gluten, you're not going to get the same structure in the baked product. Okay, and the last one we're going to look at is dairy. So dairy is where you're going to find a lot of your saturated fat. This is where your typical French cooking, you're going to have butter and cream in as many things as you can. But you can look at that recipe and go, you know what? I'm going to make my creamy sauce out of cauliflower, or I'm going to use olive oil instead of butter in the roux. And you can switch out plant-based milks for many of these products that are going to be lower in saturated fat, with the exception of coconut milk, because coconut milk is a plant-based, highly saturated fat product. And if you're trying to decrease the amount of saturated fat, you got to be careful about the amount of coconut milk you're consuming. So thickeners and creaminess instead of cream. What you can do is when you're making a soup or a smoothie, you can add legumes or tofu or cashew nuts instead of cream. And then you just pulverize it in a blender and you will get a very creamy soup. With pasta sauce, I do this all the time and have done it since my kids were wee ones, where I will add things like roasted cauliflower or cashews, legumes to make more of a creamy sauce. So I'll take some of the pasta sauce out, put it in a blender with either cauliflower, cashews, or legumes, pulverize it, put it back into the pasta sauce, and that bit, let's say a cup of it, and that cup will then thicken the rest of the sauce. So you can see that there are swaps that you can make in recipes. And what we're going to go through today is we're going to make this pasta salad. And you'll see here, it all starts with rotini, but instead of just a box of rotini, I made it with, well, mine's not whole wheat, mine's made out of quinoa and brown rice, which is a whole grain because I'm gluten-free, but I chose a gluten-free pasta. That's one swap. I looked at the Olive Garden light Italian dressing, saw that the second ingredient was sugar, and there were a bunch of preservatives in it. And I'm like, I don't need that in my diet, nor my kids' diet. So I swapped it out for basil pesto. And then we're going to add a dash of vinegar to it. So that's going to be my dressing. It's going to be a pesto with some fig vinegar. Then with the vegetables, they were good on the vegetables. I'm going to have the onion and the cucumber and the yellow pepper, but I'm also going to add a little bit of extra crunch in there with some diced carrots. Now, this is where it gets real. They want an 8-ounce package of deli ham, a 5-ounce package of pepperoni, and a 5-ounce package of salami. You don't need that. You don't need it for flavor, and you don't need it for your health. Occasionally, yeah, yummy, but if you're trying to make a healthy dinner for your family and you can make it ahead of time, because it gets better with time, these cold pasta dishes. And instead of adding 4 slices of provolone cheese and a 1/4 cup of feta cheese, I'm just going to sprinkle some nutritional yeast on the top of the pasta salad. It's going to give it that salty umami taste instead of the cheese. And I might top it with a little bit of of mint leaves sliced. Why? Because I can. Just because I can. So let's go over to the next camera where you can see my cutting board, and we are going to start making this pasta dish. So I have already gone ahead and cooked quinoa brown rice pasta that I got from Trader Joe's. And again, it said cook it from 7 to 10 minutes. I cooked it for 7 because I wanted to stand up in a pasta salad. So to this, we are going to add, well, you know what? Let's start by making our pesto. And pesto is super easy. So we are going to start with some pine nuts. And I make mine dairy-free. So you can feel free to add Parmesan if you want, but all right, we got some pine nuts to give it some, help it hold together, give it some protein. I am going to add some garlic to mine, because garlic, what's pesto without garlic? And we are going to just Smash this down so we can take the outer hard peel off of there, and we're going to stick it into there. I'm going to put this, and I'm going to cut it up a little bit because what's really important when you're making pesto is you don't want to overmix when you have the delicate leaves, the basil leaves in there. So I'm just frying the garlic with the nuts until they're smaller pieces, which is great. And now I am going to add basil, whole bunch of basil. Oh, it smells so good, especially in the winter time when it's rainy and snowy, and I could just wear this as perfume and it lightens up my mood. All right, so we've got some of that in there. I could add walnuts if I wanted to. You can choose what greens and what nuts you want. You can make it out of so many different things. I like to add a shot of lemon juice because I don't want it wilting and turning a dark color. So it will help with the oxidation process. So we are going to squeeze in the juice of 1 lemon. I just got a shower in my face. Came out the back way, the back end. Thank you, lemon. All right. And I am just going to add a little bit of salt and pepper over here. And then I drizzle the oil in as it is going. So I guess you can see that. Turn the top on. And here I'm going to pulse it because I don't want to chop up the bottom layer and then the top layer doesn't work. Okay. So now I'm going to turn it on and I am going to pour olive oil into the top until it kind of sloshes around a little bit. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's sloshing. And I'm going to scrape it down. And I really don't care right now if there's larger pieces of the basil because it's a cold pasta salad. I kind of want it like that. I'm going to keep it a little chunkier. Oh, I wish you were here with me. I would love cooking for you all. All right, so now we have some really creamy basil pesto that I'm going to add to this. And I'm going to put it in now because I want it to just absorb that delicious flavor. And that's going to be better than your Olive Garden sugary stuff I can't pronounce in it stuff. All right. And because I want a source of acid, I love these flavored vinegars. And this is going to be one of my solutions for how can you make things taste good. You know, you can use flavored vinegar and oil, especially if you aren't using a lot of oil. That way you can give your dish a much more robust flavor profile. So now we've got it all dressed up and nowhere to go. And I'm going to add some chickpeas because remember, this is one source of my protein is chickpeas. Another source is edamame beans. I'm going to pretend I'm adding them, but I'm really not because my son is deathly allergic to soybeans and he won't be able to enjoy this. But pretend I added it in there. And then we want some crunch. So we're looking for various textures. We got the creaminess of the basil. We got the softness of the pasta. And now I want some crunchiness from some nuts, as well as the vegetables I'm going to add to it. So they don't have to be super small. You can buy these in pieces already. And you can see that I'm just chopping it. And then I am going to add this into my bowl of pasta. All right. And let's add some tomatoes. Just because I had some and they were getting a little soft. And I said, instead of wasting something, let's use it somewhere. All right, so we've got our tomatoes. This is a great way to use up what you have left. So, for instance, sometimes when I have leftover salmon, what I will do is I will make this dish that you see here, and I will actually add chunks of salmon to it, roasted broccoli to it, with a basil pesto, and it is incredibly delicious. It doesn't taste like quote unquote leftovers, right? It's something that the kids run to. Now we're going to need some onion. I don't tend to like purple onions that much, but for this type of recipe, I do. So we don't need much. And I am going to just slice these up right here. Wonderful. And it's still a little big. So you can do it for whatever size that you want. You could use shallots, you could use regular onion. You can skip the onion if you don't like onion. And then I am going to add, and because of the time, what time is it? I want to get to your questions. So I am going to add some peppers to it. And I think if I'm fancy pantsy, I can keep cooking while I'm answering questions. Let's see if I can do this, people. Wish me well. All right, I'm going to end the show. I'm going to go and look at questions. And hopefully we can keep on. All right, here we go. All right. So Maria, you're asking about not feeling full after eating plant-based meals. Yes, at supper time. So what makes you feel full, it's called satiation, is fats and protein. So I wonder if you aren't getting enough fats and protein in your plant-based meal. I know some are trying to stay off of all types of fats, and you do you. And if that's the case, maybe you can add some nuts that have fat in them, some avocado that can provide some fat, and sources of protein, legumes. So you need stuff that is very satiating, that is going to make you feel full longer. And if it's high in carbs, carbohydrates, grains, just that without the protein, it will not fill you up. So now I'm adding some cucumber. All right. What are some good guidelines for flavor? I'm new at the whole food, plant-based cook and regularly disappointed with bland tasting food. No, 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 Sherry. So a couple of things. Go become a food coach. But I say that half jokingly. But this is what we teach in the Food Coach Academy. Get those cookbooks, the cookbooks that I'm going to show you, but also the 2 books that came out from Clinic to Kitchen. It shows you exactly how to add the flavor. Because what I'm all about is basically making healthy food delicious, because if we can't do that, we're not going to improve people's health in any way if we can't make them incredibly delicious. And we can. It absolutely is possible and probable once you know how to do it. So you want to make sure there's a source of acid in your food. So that's lemon, lime, vinegars. When you're cooking, you want to add herbs and spices. I'm not sure if you do oils or not, but you could perhaps do a flavored oil so you don't have to use much of it. And cooking techniques. So if you're making vegetables, instead of having this carrot right here, what you can do is you can roast the carrot. It becomes caramelized and then it becomes delicious. So there definitely are culinary techniques that you can learn to do easily, and it can make your food just incredibly delicious. Are air fryers healthy and nutritionally sound to use for a particular food? Um, so I have, yes. So you'll see if you scroll down, I got Mark for you a link. Air fryers are healthy in terms of they decrease the amount of fat without having you have to submerge your food in oil. Uh, so I like them if, and there's a big if there. It depends what the air fryer is made of. If it's made out of toxic chemicals called PFAS, then no, I would say no. But there are, and you'll see in that link, there are air fryers. They're now using ceramic interiors instead of that non-stick Teflon like thing that can off gas and really make you sick. So yes, air fryers are a way to cook food to retain nutrients and prevent too much fat in your diet. And as long as you get one that is doesn't have the PFAS in it. All right. I need more iron, so helpful hints on how to hit daily requirements. Diane, I'm assuming you are plant based. So, foods that are really high in iron are a lot of your legumes, like white beans, kidney beans, chickpeas. So, make sure you get a serving of legumes every day and dark leafy greens like Swiss chard or spinach. Quinoa also provides some iron. So if I were you, I'd go online, I'd say, okay, plant-based foods that are high in iron, figure out what they are and make sure that you have 2 or 3 servings of those every day. Make sense? Okay. For someone new to cooking, can you recommend some good choices and brands for cutting knife, pot, and pan? So Mark, I do not use nonstick pans. And I can't afford the high expensive pans. So I usually use this is called cooking with Teflon. So if there's a coating on here that can flick off, you don't want to be eating that. So getting something that has a stainless steel surface is one thing. And for cutting knives, I actually just did a whole podcast on this. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You can get a chef's knife for like $20, but you definitely want a chef knife, a paring knife, and a serrated knife because those are really important. And you can do most everything in the kitchen with just those 3 types of knives. What would I say to someone on the fence about plant based eating? I see a lot of people going back to eating meat because they say they were told by their doctors to eat meat again. Michelle, I don't know why a doctor would say that, unless perhaps they were older and their muscle mass was decreasing because they weren't getting enough protein, or they were growing and they weren't getting enough protein. With a plant based diet, you can easily get enough protein in your diet. You just need to make sure that you're adding nuts and seeds and legumes and whole grains into your diet. And if you're on the fence, well, I'm not going to kick you off the fence, Michelle, but I'd say, can you get off the fence sometime? Can you try introducing one plant-based meal a week and then go for two? And maybe have your lunches all be plant-based and see how you enjoy it. I don't know what your specific needs are, but if you are pregnant and lactating and things like that, you need to see a dietitian to make sure you're getting enough protein and iron. What could be a first step and how to choose a path when there are so many potential ways and how to decide on pricing? So, Cynthia, if you can state that question again, are you talking about becoming a food coach? Or are you talking about what diet to follow? All right, Mark, you're asking about cooking your veggies and you want to keep them as nutritionally intact as possible. And I know you do not like to use oils, but those comments throughout this was about flavored oil. So you don't need to use a lot. You could use like a teaspoon of flavored oil over your steamed vegetables. You can use some sources of acid, right? So some vinegars, some flavored vinegars. I have a ginger flavored vinegar that would go really well on your steamed vegetables, and herbs and spices. All right, Diane. Hmm? Okay. I'm just going to refresh the page here. All right. Uh, do you think blended smoothies are good? Minimizing sugar from fruits if possible. Diane, you can actually make smoothies without fruit. Um, you could have something that, let's invent something right now, Diane. So you want leafy greens in there. So let's put some kale and collard greens and some yogurt, some plant-based milk, a little bit of cocoa, some avocado, and some of the maybe a if you got a very unripe banana, that that would serve you well, and just adding a tiny bit until and you stop when it gets too sweet. But you can make whatever smoothie you want using other different ingredients in there. All right. What was the brand and flavor? Okay. The brand and flavor, these are everywhere, these flavored vinegars, and there's different quote unquote brands. I live in Burlington, and so but when I was in Boston, when I was in New York, you always had these little stores popping up. This is called Saratoga, but people just slap on their own label to whoever sources this vinegar. But that's what it is right now. This was done for Burlington specifically. But if you have an olive oil store near you, if you're near a medium to large city, you'll be able to find them. I've heard you mention oil and butter a few times. Uh, yes. So, Misha, that's why I said there's a lot of you that are taking the Whole Foods plant-based forks over knives. I believe that is says that oil is to be avoided at all costs. In my experience as a 30-year practicing PhD nutritionist, there and talking to Walter Willett, who is the most knowledgeable person about fats in the entire world. He works at Harvard, and I've had these conversations with him. You do need sources of unsaturated fats to help your cell membranes become more fluid. So I don't use butter, but in terms of oils, getting some omega 3s, you can get them through seeds. Yes, you can. I am not strict about avoiding all oil because the data for um, olive oil in the Mediterranean diet is very robust about how healthy that is. But this is the thing, Misha, your journey, your health journey, your food journey, and your food story is so unique to you that it's really about you have the information and what feels right for you. Does it feel right for you? How does your body feel when you don't have any oil and butter? Does it feel better? Because Misha, your body will never lie. So I can say, "Oh, I talked to Walt Willett, and this is what he said," but your body might be going, "You know what, Misha? I don't like it when you eat this oil." Listen to your body. All right. What is the most effective and efficient way to clean produce? You all right. So I added a present on for you. There's a PDF handout that goes into when you shop for fruit, which ones you put in the fridge, which ones you leave out, which ones you leave out and then put in the fridge, which ones you wash right away, and which ones you don't wash right away. You do not need, I'm going to start here, with any soap or detergent to wash your produce because that can leave a maybe some byproducts from it which you don't need. And scrubbing briskly with a brush, I have this, I'm just going to grab it, I have this produce brush like you'll see right here. So I'm doing this with it. It's going to get everything off of there with cold running water. So take a look at that PDF. It'll tell you what you can wash and what you really shouldn't wash. Is it okay to use onions that have sprouted? I generally do. Oh, Diana, I had to look that up. And yes, you can. You can actually, well, cut out the part that's sprouted, but it doesn't have any toxins in it. Unlike potatoes, which when you see some sprouts in them, this contains toxins. So I would need to really take this out, dig deep to make sure I get all the sprout out before I would eat that potato. But yes, you can. It might be a little bitter because it's aging, but you absolutely can eat. onions that have sprouted. As long as when you open them, it's not slimy, it's not dark colored, and it doesn't have this off smell. Dried minced onion is the same as granulated onion. Yes. Is it appropriate when steaming beets to conveniently include some cut potatoes and veggies in the same steaming basket, or does each require different cooking times? Let's see, beets, potatoes, and carrots. Yes, they're all. When I went through the density of the and the texture, right? You can leave them in the steaming basket for the same amount of time. You wouldn't put something that is softer in there because then that would overcook. So you want to make sure that the density of all your vegetables and they're cut the same size, so they cook at the same time. Excuse me. Would soaking old-fashioned oats in soy milk overnight decrease the amount of time that I would need to microwave the oats for? Diane, you don't even need to stick it in the microwave. You can just soak them overnight in the old-fashioned oats. Um, yeah, they will soften up in the milk overnight. But you couldn't use like the groats, right? Where you actually need to cook the oats, but you're saying old-fashioned oats. So I'm thinking that's the sliced old-fashioned oats. TB, Tybee. Just want to say thank you in advance. My question, where to find recipes for my guy who loves his meat and taters. Uh, he does not like many of the curries and sim seasonings. All right, your meat and taters guy. So how I would approach someone like him is exposure. Um, Not necessarily asking him to try things, but creating stuff that is really tasty in his periphery and seeing if he'll try bites here and there. I don't have recipes for that class, but I'm sure if you contact Rouxbe, they will let you know what that is. Um, and you can tweak his diet a little bit if he's up for it, or you're not going to tweak it; he's going to tweak it. Using something like the motivational interviewing technique, where you just kind of show people through taste, they might want to make a change. I almost forgot the last important piece here. So instead of cheese, I've got some nutritional yeast that I'm adding to the top that is going to taste kind of Parmesan-y. And I just really want to show you how delicious this looks. And when I get off, I'm going to be eating quite the big bowl full of my pasta salad. Do let me know if you like yours. All right, let's see. I've occasionally cooked for a preschool. They decided, to do something with a local farm. I like that. Any ideas about spontaneously cooking from boxes of seasonal veggies for finicky kids? Yes, Joy, absolutely. Let them play with the veggies. Let them touch them, smell them, lick them. Um, Kids that are cooking together tend to eat what their friends eat. So you can throw together you can make a soup. You could, let's see, it's a box of vegetables. I would do I would do soups. I would do a cold soup and maybe a hot soup, but I'd also cut them up into sticks and then make dipping sauces. Kids love dipping more than anything. So you don't have to go with sour cream or cream cheese, but you can use unsweetened yogurt, add some garlic to it, and have them throw in some flavors. You can put some onions in there and, really talk about the color, talk about how it feels. I teach kids that real food doesn't bounce. So sometimes I'll bounce it in front of them. And if it does, if it doesn't bounce, it's a whole food. That's how I get kids off of gummy fruit, but you want to make it fun and enjoyable. So that's all the time that we have today. I want to thank you all for coming and for being patient with me. And I wish you all a happy daylight savings time, I guess, right? Where are you all? Yes. Hello. Um, so I wish you all a delicious next month. and we will be meeting in a month's time and try something new.